Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Independent Creatives Podcast. My name is Wes. I'm a comic book artist, and today I have David with me. David, could you give us a brief introduction?
Sure. I'm David Campiti from Glasshouse Graphics and Glasshouse Studios Animation. Been in the business 40 something years, doing comic books, graphic novels, animation. I've probably done just about every aspect of it because I've been an editor, a publisher, an art director. I've helped start companies. I've written thousands of pages of comics over the years. Uh, I've produced animation. I've done cartoon voices. So yeah, I've been around quite a bit.
That's pretty impressive. I was looking at your website, and we have like all these different services that you guys offer, and you were telling me that uh, you employ a lot of independent artists to actually do these projects for you because whenever you got started in this, you were a writer, correct?
Yes, started in the business as a writer way back in 1982. I was writing short comic stories for Pacific Comics. Within a
Hmm.
couple of years, I was writing some Superman stuff for editor Julia Schwartz at DC, and started packaging comics for various publishers soon after that. By 1988, I had started Innovation Publishing, which I ran for 5 years, and we did a lot of uh, good selling comics that were tie-ins and adaptations of movies and TV shows and best-selling novels and things like that. And then in 1993, I started Glasshouse Graphics, and so we have been an agency representing artists, a few writers, colorists, designers, letterers, the whole gamut of talent for over 30 years now. And so we have talent all over the world, the Philippines and Europe, Brazil, India, Indonesia, Mexico, and a few other places.
So what specifically was the difference between Glasshouse Graphics and the company that you started previously? Was it s- is this something that's more of like a comprehensive package, whereas before it was more tailor suited to one particular industry or the other?
Well, Glasshouse Graphics started because I had been running innovation publishing for 5 years.
Right.
And we were traditional comics publishers selling to the dozen distributors in the direct sales market, and doing quite well with the Vampire Lestat, Interview with a Vampire, Lost in Space, Quantum Leap, Dark Shadows, Beauty and the Beast, all sorts of comics like that. And in searching for talent, um, I lucked upon a phone call with a fellow named José de Carvalho out of Brazil. And he said, David, we have so many artists you would not believe. We started working with him and brought Joe Bennett, Mike Diodato, Luke Ross, OJ Cariello, and so many other artists out of Brazil to work on those books. Then, when I decided to leave Innovation, the company I'd started, I realized I could represent those artists into the US because there were
Okay.
so many of those artists that Innovation wasn't using. And
Mhm.
so we expanded out with the 40 something artists that were available to us. And within a couple of days of starting Glasshouse Graphics, we started working on, I think it was Green Hornet for Now Comics. It was Joe Bennett's first project for
Mhm.
somebody that wasn't Innovation. And
Mhm.
we expanded out to, Continuity and Eclipse and all those other publishers. And before long, we were doing tons of work for Marvel, DC, and so forth. And so we began with all the artists out of Brazil. And before long, I expanded into opening an office in the Philippines and then uh, reaching out to artists all through Europe and elsewhere. So it just became this big web of over 200 artists worldwide. And so worked on that for so many years. And then about 15 years into it, we started doing animation. And it got to be enough that I spun that off into Glasshouse Studios. And now we're doing animation work for a variety of clients.
So that's pretty interesting because you seem to have taken this route that it kind of reminds me of what Todd McFarlane did, where he started to branch out and to do other things. It reminds me a little bit of Robert Rodriguez, who's another one of my heroes. This idea of kind of like branching out into doing other things that kind of they provide stability overall for your crew of artists, which is crucial, right? Because you want to have those people on call when you need them.
Yeah, well, it's always a case of artists. You got to keep them busy, of course, but the market continues to change. You know,
Right.
when we started out, we had a dozen distributors and books selling hundreds of thousands of copies. And then, thanks to Marvel mismanagement and distributing themselves, they imploded the direct sales market. And suddenly we're down to just a Diamond. And now Diamond has filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy organization. So who knows what's going to happen with the market from there.
Mm-hmm. So what has been the most drastic change that you've seen in comics in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years? I mean, do you think that it's heading more independent, people doing their own Kickstarters? That seems to be a thing that's been picking up a lot lately, right?
Yeah, my experience with that has been, let me use this as an example. I may have my numbers a little off here because I don't have facts and figures in front of me, but I seem to recall Dynamite releasing some version of a Red Sonja #1, and it had, I don't know, a dozen covers into the direct sales market, and it sold whatever it sold. And then they did a Kickstarter of the same comic, and I believe it was a Frank Cho cover. And in terms of dollars made, I think they made more money on that one Kickstarter with just a Frank Cho cover than they did into the entire direct sales market with all those cover variants. So there's because you can sell the comics at full retail plus plus shipping, of course, and as part of it, you can set up a backer kit or pledge box at the end of it where people can order additional product. There's quite a bit of money to be made with the Kickstarter. And I realized just how broken the direct sales market was when we did a book for artist Mike Deodato, one of the absolute top guys in the business. Been around for decades, done a lot of his work through Glasshouse. We took the Jade Warriors book that he and I did with co-writer Mike Buckley back around 2000, 2001 with Image Comics, and we collected it into this oversized Absolute edition, which it had just gorgeous artwork, and so it was wonderful, big action Mike Deodato stuff, and lovely work.
Yeah.
And just really upscale with a
that's awesome.
cover there. Hidden under the art cover and all that, and this lovely slipcase. I'm showing you this all to give you an understanding of the product. So it's $75 upscale hardcover, and it finally finishes a story that we started at Image Comics. It sold many tens of thousands. Uh, Diamond supposedly supplying all the comic shops in the world, or so they told me, um,
Mhm.
bought a whopping 180 copies for the entire world.
Hmm.
Now, that was just a few $1,000s. And
Yeah.
we did easily 10 times that amount of money on the Kickstarter.
Wow. Mhm.
And uh, one of the advantages there had been we did the Absolute Edition. And then months later, we were able to offer a regular hardcover. And I have upcoming, probably if I can get it done in time, the 1st of February, we're going to release a Jade Warriors softcover edition for those who couldn't afford the $75 for the
Mhm.
Absolute or the
Yeah.
40 for the hardcover. So we were able to do 3 different editions that we're able to do on Kickstarter and reach the audience that wants it. And
Mhm.
so I'm seeing quite a bit of product on Kickstarter, on Indiegogo, some even just launching straight off BackerKit.
Hmm.
And some of these bringing in tens or in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, uh, showing you that the market isn't being properly supported by any distributor or distributors. So many people turning to Kickstarter to get the product they can't get otherwise, and that's troubling. Uh, and The other thing that I think comic fans who are only going to the comic shops don't realize is that one of the biggest publishers of comics right now isn't Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, or any of them. It's Simon and Schuster,
Mhm.
the biggest book publishers in the world. And last year, Glass House did over 8,000 pages of graphic novel art for them.
Wow.
And they're doing stuff for little kids, for teens, for the adult market. It's all over the place, and it's stuff that you're not going to see in the comic shops. It's like we did a whole series of heroes in training books, um, or well, let me show you one of these. It's for it's for a younger market, but you know it's stuff like this. And this particular series is about young versions of the Greek gods and heroes.
Mhm.
And we did heroes in training, and we also did a whole series of goddess girls. And in fact, I wrote these. So yeah, a whole pretty substantial market of books that a lot of comics fans aren't even seeing.
Mhm.
And it helps to expand their horizons. Check on Amazon, check at Barnes and Noble, go wherever there's a bookstore and see what's there, because you're missing hundreds of interesting graphic novels that never make it into your friendly neighborhood comic shop because the couple of distributors that remain aren't selling them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder why they wouldn't be selling some of these other graphic novels that seem to be resonating with people. Because it seems like if people aren't going to the comic book store or they're not finding what they want at the comic book stores and they're going to Kickstarter, I would assume that would be a good thing because that's putting more control into the creator's hands. But you said that you find it troubling.
I find it troubling because what it ultimately means is, uh, although the creator may ultimately see substantially more money through the Kickstarter if they do everything right,
Mhm.
it still means that the circulation is relatively small compared to what it should be. I can sell 500 copies of a book on Kickstarter at full retail, and then have people ordering additional back stuff in the backer kit. So they may order 3 or 4 or 5 other things from that. And I'm making some good money on it, but I've still only sold to 500 people. Where a properly functioning direct sales market, I should be selling thousands. I look back at in the 80s when I was packaging black and white comics for various publishers then. They were selling 10, 20, 30, 40 or 1,000 or more copies of black and white comics to comics readers then.
Mhm.
And then as we got into the 90s, I could sell 60,000 copies of Lost in Space, for example, or I could do 40-some thousand copies of Anne Rice's Vampire Lestat and keep going back to press for reprints that would also sell through the direct sales market. And when I finished doing the comic, I could go back, collect it as a trade paperback and hardcover, and re-release that into the direct sales market, as well as into the bookstore market. And so, ultimately, 100, 200,000 people maybe on some of these were seeing these comics. And now you've got to rely on Kickstarter, and maybe you're selling 500, 600, 1,000 if you're lucky copies. That is troubling because the audience is smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay.
One of the things too is some of the more successful books on Kickstarter and on Indiegogo are happening because the publishers pretend, I say pretend, to be so politically correct they don't want to do girly comics. Oh no, so-and-so artist draws the characters too sexy. They need to tone it down, or we can't give them a job. Oh no, we're bringing more female writers and artists in because we don't want to do sexy books. And then look at all those sexy variants that are coming out with their characters.
Right.
So they're happy to slap it on the cover to make it sell. So
Right.
it's not genuine. So what's happening is the adult readers who like those sexy comics. There are a lot of guys out there that appreciated that stuff in the 90s, and here 20, 30 years later, they're still appreciating it, or a whole new audience that went from kids to grown up, and they want something a little more interesting to their tastes now. They don't find it so much in the comic shops because publishers aren't publishing them. But by gosh, they're finding them in the Kickstarters and Indiegogo books.
Yeah.
We did Jade Warriors. My wife does a sexy comic called Bonsai Girl that she's done a dozen issues of, and we've been able to repackage that in various formats for Kickstarter. We did a series called Exposure, which is kind of like the X-Files with babes. So it's sexy supernatural stuff. And that stuff has been doing very well on the crowdfunding circuit. Now, and here's something else. I don't know if you're aware of a very smart fellow named Eric July. He started a company called Rippaverse, and he did a book not through crowdfunding, but on his own website. He has a large following online. He has a podcast and he talks, I don't know, politics and any of a number of other things. And he showed just how much the direct market has fallen apart. He put he'd never published a comic or graphic novel before. He came to me, said, "I want to do this. I want it to look right. I want to be able to have a product that stands up to the best of what Marvel and DC are doing. And I know you do those books. You have that talent there." So I said, "Yes, we'll do that for you." So he did a graphic novel through us called ISOM, ISOM. The
Hmm.
first ISOM book that he did with his own crowdfunding raised more than $3.7 million.
Hmm.
In a market where Marvel and DC are having trouble selling 10, 20, 30,000 copies of their books.
Yeah.
$0.7 million. And he's gone on to do ISOM Book 2 and 3 and Alpha Core and a whole bunch of other titles, many of which my company supplies the artwork, and the books are real good looking. And he has a whole structure set up to do fulfillment on these projects that he's crowdfunding off his own website, and they're doing phenomenally well. So it shows the readers are out there. They're
Hmm.
just not being reached with one or two distributors only distributing a portion of the product. So uh, I get to see that firsthand because we're supplying the artwork.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting bottleneck that we've seemed to run into. Yeah, that's a really good point. If you don't have some sort of company out there that's pushing the books, then only 500 people that buy it are actually going to see it, as opposed to how many times you could take that same book and flip it and put
Yeah.
it into, yeah. Wow.
Hey, oh, before I forget,
Hmm.
let me see if I can find this. Um, I have right now on Indiegogo. Your followers might be interested in this. Um,
Okay.
we we've created a classic comic book spinner rack. It's hard if you're
Hmm.
a fan of comics and you thought, oh, it would be cool to have an old fashioned comic book spinner rack in my office or in my
Yeah.
den or in my art studio, or if
Yeah.
you were a store and trying to get a comic rack and they're kind of tough to get, or uh, think about it. You could be a publisher that wants to do spinner racks that you offer to stores with your customized company logo on top. Well, we figured out a way to do it. Back, you can probably see some of this there. This is a comic spinner rack that we've created, full size, 40 pocket rack. On the top of it, you can uh, customize the what's on top any way you like. Uh,
Hmm.
we supply different toppers for it. You can also put in your own because they slide in and out. They're available in white or black. They come. Um, this is something spinner racks had never had before. Um, you can disassemble this down to something about that big.
Hmm.
Uh, disassemble in about 8 minutes. They can be put into a three-wheeled zippered carrier, and you can cart that thing off to conventions and trade shows and set it up in 8 minutes, and there you have a spinner rack at your booth for showcasing your books.
Do you want to post the link to that in the private chat, and I'll pull it up on here.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Let me see if I can do that here. Um, Let me make sure I'm giving you the right thing because I
Mhm.
probably should have set this up before. Um, see if this opens. Sorry about this.
All good. All good.
I'm trying to type spinner rack into this thing.
If you'd like, you can just send it to me after we get done recording,
Okay.
and I'll put it in the description.
That'll be fine. That'll be fine.
So what we're looking at here is I'm flipping through your website, and I've got your manga artist pulled up. Well, for one thing, you have a huge team of different people: sculptors,
Oh yeah.
painters, graphic designers, animators. It was what I wanted to ask you earlier was that it definitely opened up a lot of doors for you to do a bunch of different creative stuff, just even for yourself, right? Like you said, you've written a couple of these. You've written some books for Simon and Schuster and other products and properties. But it's really interesting that you put yourself into this position where I would imagine you've been around for 40 years, so obviously you have stability in what it is that you're able to provide in the industry. But at the same time, you've also opened up a bunch of doors for you to do different creative things that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to.
Well, that's been interesting because I'm usually so busy running Glass House that when writing opportunities came up, and honestly, there aren't that many writing jobs that come our way, but
Okay.
the occasional ones that do, I would go to any of 5 or 6 different five or six different writers, um, like Andy Mangels, Bobby Nash, David Lawrence, Bill Yu, and so forth, that uh, that I would say, "Are you interested in these?" and turn the jobs over to whichever of those the client was interested in. In the case of the stuff from Simon and Schuster, they came to me. The art director had recognized my name off other comics that he had read and enjoyed, and said, "Would you be interested in doing these?" So I ended up doing, I think it ended up being 11 graphic novels for Simon and Schuster. And then when word got out that I was doing these, because the marketing stuff came out, then another publisher, Abdo Books, that we were already doing artwork for, contacted me and said, "Oh, you're doing all these things on Greek mythology. Would you be able to write some straightforward graphic novels about Greek mythology for the school market?" I said, "Sure." So the next thing I knew, I was doing like 6 graphic novels, different aspects of Greek mythology there. So I was happy to do it. Or I loved this one. Back in the early 90s, we were doing Quantum Leap, doing new stories, continuing after the TV show and so forth. And last year, I get a call from Deborah Pratt, who was the co-creator, producer, sometimes writer of the Quantum Leap TV series, both the old one and the new one. And she said, "Oh, I was in my storage facility and came across some of those wonderful Quantum Leap comics that you did. Would you be interested in doing a new book with me?" And I immediately thought, "Are we going to do more Quantum Leap? That would be terrific." And she said, "Well, I did a teleplay for a pilot for a series called Warrior One that was based on a series of novels that I have out." And she said, "Would you be interested in working on that?" I said, "Sure." And before you know it, we did a Warrior One graphic novel.
Nice.
So I ended up writing the adaptation from her teleplay, and Will Conrad did the wonderful, wonderful artwork for it. And the stuff was just gorgeous.
Wow, very nice.
And So, these opportunities do come our way, and I am happy to do them. So, uh, good word of mouth means a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, we were doing um, a lot of material for DreamWorks, and the art director at DreamWorks recommended Glass House to the art director at Simon and Schuster, and that's how I got the call that ended up with us doing all those books for them.
Wow. So whenever you're looking for artists to work with, what do you look for in terms of qualities for somebody that you're going to work with on a book like that, or you're working with a team of artists whenever you're working on that on six graphic novels,
Oh
right?
yeah, when doing the books for Simon and Schuster is a very different situation from most publishers, because
Hmm.
they would come to us and it's like, we want to do 6 volumes of a book called Spirited and 660-page books, and we need them done in a year. Well, you do the arithmetic and you realize you're up what, 900 pages or whatever it comes out to be
Yeah.
in a year. There's no single artist or artist, inker, colorist team that
Uh-huh.
could do 800 or 900 pages in a year. So I have a structure set up with my partner Salvador DeMarco uh, in Italy, and they handle all these books. So he has a team set up that, working much in the way our animation studios would be, with several artists that can work in the same style. So you put a master artist on it, and um, that controls the look, and then you make sure you have some good storytelling going on, and uh, you deliver the finished books in the style they've approved.
Hmm.
So Simon and Schuster is a special case with all that. That's why they had to get the recommendation from DreamWorks, because we were capable of turning out so much work in such a brief amount of time. But
Hmm.
most books aren't that way. More like Warrior One with Will Conrad, where it was an 8-month or 9-month process getting a big graphic novel done.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so that's a more typical process, and it's just as doing a book for Marvel or DC or Dark Horse or AWA or any of the others, where they have a monthly schedule, or whatever it's going to turn out to be. So
Hmm.
you just have artists that, whatever their work speed is, you structure the jobs, you get them for that work speed. I've got artists that can, like Joe Bennett. Joe Bennett is
Hmm.
amazing. The tight, dramatic, powerful pencils that
Hmm.
are like classic John Buscema or Jose Luis Garcia Lopez or Gil Kane, that big classic action style. And like those artists of old, he can turn out 2 pages a day.
Yeah.
So it's not too many artists who can do that. But he did a whole long run of Immortal Hulk, and he's been doing the books for Kingstone, a religious publisher. He's been doing work for Ripaverse and for other clients. So yes, very dramatic, powerful stuff. Um, Will Conrad, Cliff Richards, uh, uh, Dave Santana, just so many wonderful artists that are just great with storytelling. You have Mel Joyce San Juan there. I probably haven't updated her page enough, but she works in multiple styles. She's drawing a superhero project called Ascendant for a publisher that that has an ascendant game out there. She can also
Mhm.
do manga style work. I think she's got 3 or 4 styles. Plus, she can color her own stuff if necessary. And so she's always busy. We have a wonderful grouping of artists out of Italy. If you look up a fellow named Vincenzo Cucca,
Vincenzo Kuka.
yeah, he
Is this on here?
wouldn't be under manga. Just be under probably pencilers.
Pencilers.
There you go. But Vincenzo's astounding because he can do almost any style. Um, he's a one-man creative force. So anything from realistic to wild European styles to dead-on Disney.
What was his name again? Which one?
Vincenzo Cucca. Yeah, you got to scroll all the way down. They're
Oh,
they're all alphabetized, but by first name.
okay. So he's a V. Let's go all the way down here. Wow, you have so many artists, so many more pencilers than
And
than manga.
they're terrific people. There you go, Vincenzo.
This guy.
Nope, right next to him.
This guy.
Nope, go to the other side.
Oops.
See,
Oh.
Vincenzo Cucca.
Vincenzo.
Yeah, he has what he calls his
Oh, wow.
American styles. He just so many different things.
Wow. Awesome work. I love the ink work. Do most of the people that you work with, do they work digitally or they work traditionally? Or do you care?
It depends on the artist.
Mhm.
Joe Bennett, for example, still does all of his stuff on paper. It
Mhm.
is just wonderful to see these things with good, solid, traditional
Mhm.
storytelling and no shortcuts.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of artists work digitally, and that's great for the current comics market because so many people these days, or I'm sorry, so many publishers these days have special needs for types of product. For example, they may want a comic done digitally because they plan on uh, doing a sort of an animated comic often.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
on something like that, they may want foreground figures drawn, but they want all those background elements drawn completely in layers so they can move things around.
Mhm.
And if you were doing that traditionally, that would be just too complicated.
Yeah.
So I have artists that do both. Have
Mhm.
no problem working on paper. Have no problem working digitally.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll do work on paper because they know they have folks who will want to buy the originals later.
Mhm.
But uh, I shudder a bit to think of all the original art that doesn't exist right now.
Mhm.
People who for so many decades in comics have just taken it for granted that there's all this original artwork that's out there. And 20 years down the road, they're going to be looking around and say, wait a minute, where's all the original art? All the stuff is the old stuff that's now selling for huge amounts of money because there's so little original art that's being produced now on paper.
Mhm.
So what is being done is going to become a lot more valuable in the years to come.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Choosing between digital and traditional. I mean, it's good to know that the markets for the traditional stuff is still there. As somebody who's just now getting into comics, and I've only done a couple of books, but I have found that the digital definitely helps with whenever you make major f ups, which there's a benefit to doing it traditionally and then having to actually think that through.
Yeah.
but there's a speed that comes with the digital as well. And it's refreshing too when you go back to doing traditional because you have a little bit of experience under your belt, even if it was with a little bit of a safety net.
Oh, sure, sure. Uh,
Mhm.
one of the things I'm finding is some of our artists that still do their pencils traditionally
Mhm.
will then scan their work, send it over to an inker, who will then ink it on a Wacom Cintiq or on an
Mhm.
iPad or something.
Mhm.
So you end up having the digital files of the inks, but the pencils still exist as physical originals.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So that's an
I've found that
alternative.
an interesting thing of late, and a lot of Joe Bennett's pencils are being done that way. Um, so he's scanning stuff and sending it over to any of three or four different inkers that we work with for
Mhm.
him, and they're all inking their stuff on tablets.
That makes sense. Yeah. So do you, whenever you were saying earlier, you were talking about you have a company like Simon and Schuster that comes to you with this idea of like, okay, well, we need 800 illustrated comic pages done within a year or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And you have to kind of make them step back and kind of walk them through a process that's more reasonable for what you do with with image generators. Do you see some of these companies that are not like I guess you could break the industry up into certain subsections uh, that there's a totally different market, right? Because Simon and Schuster, the people that are reading those comics, they don't really care about the authorship as much as somebody from Marvel or DC, right? Like if Marvel or DC gets caught using AI, they're really ruining their brand. But is Simon and Schuster really doing that? You know?
I have not seen it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what every division and every art director, everybody in editorial is doing. I
Yeah.
just know the stuff we're doing is all real artists doing it by hand.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah,
But
I'm.
do you think that a part of the market, like I said, like a company like that, do you think a part of the market that something like AI may, it may be, it may seem like an appealing option in regards to having a huge amount of stuff done.
Yeah, one of the things that people have found, and I've seen a few artists run some tests of trying to do comics, whether they look like CG artwork or whether they uh, look like hand drawn or whatever, is the panel to panel consistency and
Mhm.
level of storytelling. There is no storytelling on these things.
Right. Mhm.
Um, and then you've got folks with, or panel after panel where costumes change because there's
Yeah.
that consistency problem, or all the characters are standing there with their arms at their sides because it's still having trouble generating hands correctly, or um, it's very difficult to get across um, correct storytelling when trying to do it um, with with uh, with these image generators.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think respectable companies are going to hold off on AI uh, because there's, I think there's a chance that there could be a lot of lawsuits coming down the road
Yeah.
because all of this AI scrapes up stuff from established artists,
Yeah.
and it's gotten so ridiculous that I've seen AI stuff generated that if you look carefully, you can see some watermark from an
Yeah.
artist that's
Yeah.
appearing in the AI generation, or somebody did a description of the Punisher character fighting a giant whale. And all it did was regenerate a cover that Mike Deodato had drawn.
Yeah.
And you could put the two side by side. Like, that's it. It just stole the Mike Deodato art. So, I can see artists or even companies suing other companies, or artists suing those companies, because the image generation it's just plagiarism software. And so I think companies may be wise staying away from it until someone figures out a way to properly compensate the people, the talent that the software is scraping.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty gross thing that we've seen happen over these last. It seems like it's only been a couple of years, but it just seems like it's everywhere now.
Yeah. In the years to come, I think there may be a big change in the way comics are done. In my mind, I'm imagining what would happen if they do figure out a way to compensate artists properly and so forth, and it becomes a legitimate tool like Photoshop or Google SketchUp or Manga Studio or any of those things, where an artist can draw his breakdowns or pencils and then take it into an image generator, and then it creates finishes from those layouts or pencils. At least the artist that's actually doing the work is in control of the final artwork.
Yeah.
So it would be assisted, just like Photoshop or any of these others are helping you get the artwork done.
Yeah.
And that, I think, would be a fair and reasonable thing in the years to come. But it's all got to come down to how do you compensate the people that these programs have been stealing from.
Yeah. So where do you see the comic book industry? Do you see anything like happening in the next 5 or 10 years that you're anticipating that you don't see a lot of people talking about? Like, what do you think that the distribution channels are going to change, and like maybe more distributors are going to come on to?
They may. I think it would be smart for more distributors to start up and be willing to carry product. I know a couple of the other distributors beyond Diamond. Some of the publishers out there that would love for them to distribute. Those new distributors haven't had the, how do I phrase this? Haven't had the professional courtesy to even respond to some of those clients. I hear those complaints because of where I am in the work that we're doing. So there needs to be more professionalism all around in the distributors that are out there, but there needs to be an expansion there somehow. The biggest problem that I see has happened, and it's what's gotten the market into the shape that it's in, is you have these billion-dollar mega corporations that own the biggest comic companies. Disney, that literally paid billions to buy Marvel, not only the studio but the comics line, and they've done nothing to help expand the distribution of comics. All they said to Marvel was, well, we really don't care about the comics. We were buying the characters because we can do the merchandising and the movies. So it doesn't matter that this movie Endgame made $2 billion. We're not going to factor a penny of that toward the comics. That's its own thing. The comics have to make money on their own.
Yeah.
Well, that has prevented the comics part of the business from paying a fair wage for what's being done. So rates are, in very real dollars, probably half what they were back in, say, 1997. Rates have not gone up, but then with inflation, it's gotten even worse. So they're not able to pay more because the books aren't selling more, so there's no royalties. So it's an endless cycle of selling worse and worse. And then when you have only Diamond distributing and they're not doing the greatest job, and that means there are fewer and fewer comic shops, everything is collapsing in on itself.
Mhm.
Now, if Marvel years ago, as owned by Disney, they had said, all right, we have this, we've got this structure, we've got all these comics, we need to get these comics out into the world, uh, make them seen by more people. Disney
Mhm.
had the power to do that. They could have started a whole fresh distribution system. It
Yeah.
could have gone into theaters. It could have gone into um, Walmart in a very real big way because Disney gets what it wants. Uh, who knows what uh, the marketing geniuses at Disney could have come up with? Same with Warner Brothers. Owning DC Comics and not doing anything to expand the base of the comics that are responsible for their billion-dollar movies. It's kind of sad that they've given so little attention to the core product. So
Mm.
without that, I honestly don't know where it's going to go. I've been saying for the past 20 years, some genius needs to come in and figure out a whole new distribution system. Some years ago, I tried to help with that. I was involved with a company that was going to get uh, comics distributed into Toys R Us. There was going to be a weekly comic book that was going to be given away in Toys R Us that was half advertising for all the stuff the Toys R Us sells, and the other half be comics that people could read just to have a way to expand the market. And unfortunately, that didn't happen for a number of reasons, including, of course, Toys R Us eventually closed down because of all their uh, money maneuvering. But uh, there's got to be somebody smarter than me that can figure out a new distribution structure. I just don't know what that would be.
Wow. Okay. All right. I think we'll end this here. We're almost at an hour now.
Okay.
Uh, so if they want to check out the artist it is that you work with and the different products and portfolio that you guys have, you check out glasshousegraphics.com, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, glasshousegraphics.com. If they want to see the animation part of what we do,
Mhm.
it's ghsanimation.com.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I have a blog that's mostly about all aspects of creating comics. If people are trying to break in or fine tune their portfolio or figure out a better way to deal with editors, that's very simply at davidcampeti.com.
Okay.
Uh,
All right.
keep an eye out probably this weekend for my next Kickstarter, which will be the Jade Warriors trade paperback. And I've sent you in the private chat the link to the Indiegogo for the classic comic book rack.
Okay, cool. I'll include links for everything that David just mentioned. I'll include those in the description box below for anybody who wants to go and check out the Indiegogo or the upcoming Kickstarter, as well as his website and Glasshouse Graphics. Thank you guys for watching and take care.
Great. Thank you.